Hey there, welcome to Hopetown Sound. My name's Pierre. I wanted to make a video about the production process I've been going through with one particular artist, Matt Friedman. He does sort of a country Nashville style of singer-songwriter, and he's got an interesting thing going on where he's hiring studios in Nashville, and he's been moving it around. He's been using different producers and studios to where he sends them an acoustic demo of a song, and they arrange it and record a full band, and then they send the tracks up here. And what we've been doing is we've been recording his vocals here and then mixing and mastering that stuff here. And in the latest round, the latest 5 songs he sent, they actually left the acoustic instruments unrecorded so that we could do those here too. So that's interesting as well, even more done here. So it's a lot of fun because I've gotten a sort of a tour of Nashville through him because he's used so many different studios and producers, and it's been incredible. The musicianship has been outstanding, obviously, and it's just been so much fun to work with the tracks. So I want to do something new. First of all, putting me on the camera, but secondly, I want to actually start doing some edits in my videos, which I never do. Put a little more effort into this and go through the production process, but with edits, so it's not so long. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, from some of my other videos, you may already be familiar, but in case this is the first one you've seen, my general setup and production process is a hybrid of analog and digital and in the box. So we have the API Box 2 console. There's 24 channels, 24 faders, 24 inputs on mix. The left 8, which have mic pre's in them, and it's sort of designed for recording. But even on the mix side, we're going through these analog equalizers. Those of you familiar, these are the API 560s. These are API 550Bs, and these are really interesting. These are great. These are the H2 audio recreations of the classic Helios EQ, and I can't say enough about how much I love those. I may be looking for more. And so I have those EQs on these 8 channels. I tend to dedicate this side to drums, although when there's a need and an opening, I will move things around. So like, for instance, some of these studios are not sending me, I normally have these dedicated to kick, snare, rack, floor, overhead, so on, and room. So a lot of these studios are not sending me room mics, and that's both, that's a minus. I would love to have the room mics, as always. I find that it helps, but it's nice to have, what I'll do is I'll just send the guitars and make use of those EQs for the guitars. And in addition to what's here on the board itself, there's also the resources in this rack. So over here we've got 4 purple compressors, the Action Comps, 2 API 550A EQs, and then stuff that I tend to use. So these are some Audioscape stuff. There's their V Comp, which is sort of their take on the Gates stay level compressor, also famously recreated by Retro as well. This is also Audioscape's take on the classic Pultec and tube EQs, and I use those primarily on the mix bus insert. There's also these are amazing pieces. These are the Hazelrig VLC ones. These are mic pre's and DIs. They're all tube design, but they also do have equalizers in them. They're more of just a high-low, but you do get 2 choices of the high and low frequencies on either one of them. So they're Pultec style, but they're maybe not as targeted as these are. They're incredibly high quality. I love them. The difference between these two, I find, is that even when you're setting low frequencies or very high frequencies on the VLC ones, I find them to be a little more mid-range focused, and these audioscapes have a little more like sub warmth and you know, high air, you know, sound to them. Although you can obviously dial in mids on these as well. But I put it this way, I think that's where these excel and that's where these excel. So it's nice to have both options. Some compressors over here, the classic Fatso Empirical Labs. We got two distressors with the Britmod options and the linking, stereo image link option. I will use those a lot. It's interesting, even though the Fatso is pretty designed to be used on a bus, it is a stereo unit. I found that on, like, when I'll do a parallel drum bus from the API mixer, and I prefer actually the distressors with their linking setup to the Fatso on that particular bus. I'll use the Fatso more when I really want to, you know, generate harmonic distortion. I'll use that to crush room mics or something like that. But when I'm doing the overall drum bus, I tend to go for the distressors. Purple MC77s, it's basically Purple's take on 1176s. Fantastic, I love them. And more Audioscape. This is Audioscape's Optos. It's their take on the classic LA2A. It's optical tube compressors. Just beautiful, warm, you know, useful on just about everything. So these are some of the tools we have, and there's even more than that, but like this side of the desk tends to be sort of a mastering focused side. So we've got the Fern VT7 stereo tube compressor. This thing is an absolute beast, and it's gaining in popularity. You're starting to see them everywhere, and there's a good reason why. There's just mojo for days from this thing, and it's just big and cinematic. It's fantastic. And then there's also the Curve Bender EQ, and Softtube has made a nice plug-in version of this, but nothing beats the real thing. So this is Chandler's sort of recreation of the equalizer from a classic, you know, Abbey Road desk. So what I will do is on the mix bus, there is an insert. They call it program PGM, but it's a mix bus. There's a program insert. It comes after the built-in compressor, which is basically just two 527 compressors, but they made it linkable, which is nice. And so you can use it as a mix bus compressor. You can also assign these individually to any one of channels 1 through 4 if you wanted to. Right now, I'm using it in the mix bus. So I'll hit that, then it goes to the insert. My chain is, I'm going to the Pultex first, then the Fern compressor, then the Curve Bender. There's a reason I'm doing that order, and anybody considering a Curve Bender should be aware of this, which is the Curve Bender is finicky, and this apparently is about impedance. And if you have, for some reason, the output of the Curve Bender is not happy going into a certain transformer balanced gear. I haven't nailed down exactly which and why, but it will cause unnecessary distortion and not pleasant distortion in the mid-range and high frequencies if it is a bad match. Chandler themselves told me put it last in the chain. That's sort of the answer for that. So where I might normally have set this up a little bit differently, but it's nice and it does its job. So that's my mix bus insert. So it hits Pultex, VT7, Chandler, and then the main output, which has transformers on the output from the API. So, simply, so the mix what will happen is my individual tracks will feed individual output buses, which go to the API. That's the only opportunity to use plugins on the individual tracks is before it hits the analog chain. So I will do that as necessary, as needed. I have the SSL UC1 system, which is just a hardware controller. No sound passes through this thing, and what it controls is there's a channel strip plugin that SSL makes that's an emulation of their 9000J console. And just recently they released a second channel strip that's an emulation of their original 4000 B console. And that one is just much thicker, punchier, but not as open on the top end. So there's applications for both channel strips, and they're both wonderful. I really love them a lot. So I will hit those in addition, before it hits the analog side. There's also a SSL bus compressor plugin, and since there is no bus prior to the analog because it's coming out individual tracks, so I would actually love to hit that before it hit this whole. I'd love to be able to insert that compressor into this master bus, but that's what I'm using the 527s for. Basically, I'm using them where you would use an SSL compressor. And I've been a little bit on the fence about whether I want to buy a hardware SSL compressor. I had Audioscape's version of that. Didn't love it, but that also might just be Audioscape's version. I haven't had the luxury of, I've worked on SSLs a few times, but I haven't had the luxury of having a branded SSL compressor here in this studio to try in that chain. So that's on my mind. I might be looking to do that, but either way, right now that's what I'm doing. I'm hitting that and then the inserts. So when the mix comes out of the main output, that is feeding a stereo input on my DAW, and then that stereo input is recording in real time. I'm able to here's the layout. I'll be clear. So basically, stereo input, and then the red one here is the capture channel. And one way or another, in every DAW, if you're going to do a hybrid approach this way, you're going to end up with two channels. You're going to end up with a channel bringing in the input, and then you're going to need a second channel to actually capture. And that's your opportunity on the input channel to apply plugins before it records. And I'm using Nuendo, which is basically Cubase. And Nuendo is unique in that it actually has dedicated input channels, and that's nice, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. If you're in Logic or Pro Tools, basically you're just creating a channel that's going to be your input channel, and then you create a bus and you send from that input channel on the bus to your capture channel. And so it's more or less the same process, but so that input channel is your opportunity. So that's where even though I'm using the hardware API compressor, I will still throw on the SSL bus compressor plugin. I just hit it very lightly. Frankly, I've done a lot of mastering, and I bring that workflow from mastering, which is I'd rather use several tools in a very minimal capacity than try to use one in a very heavy capacity. I find most tools do things well in a small amount, and then most don't when you crank them up too much. So a little bit of squeeze and glue here, a little bit of squeeze and glue there after the other mastering stuff, and it's actually pretty good. It works pretty well for me. And then the final thing before capture that I hit is that's right here, is a brick wall limiter, and this is my favorite. This is the Plugin Alliance BX True Peak, and I just find it to be the most transparent in terms of getting hot levels without squashing the sound, and it works very well for me in that way. So on a technical note, if you're doing things this way and you're capturing in the DAW in the same project, you are necessarily going to be capturing. I mean, you could dither the signal, but you're capturing at the same resolution that the project is at, and that's good. Frankly, I think you want that. You want your original mix master to be at the same resolution as the original tracks, and then from that point on, you can make your downward resolutions from there. I will also normally do a mastering stage in WaveLab, which is purpose built for mastering, and so I want to have a full resolution pre-master to work with there anyway. But when I'm sending mixes to clients or just for myself, it's really easy. Like, I mean, frankly, I can take, I'm usually working 96K 32-bit. So I can take a 9632 interleaved wave file, for the mix. And, I don't even have to do any other processing. I can just take that file, and there's a little app, MP3 converter. If you're on Mac, it's either free or really cheap, or it's like $5. I don't know. It's very convenient. I recommend it. You can leave it in your dock, and you can just take your, your mix wave and just drop it on that icon, and it'll just, boom, create an MP3 in whatever settings you've set it at, and it'll be in the same folder that your wave is in. So you just go and grab the MP3 at that point. If you're somebody that uses MP3s for reference. There's other ways, I have RX9 that I use the batch converter to create lower resolution, like CD resolution wave files, 16-bit 44K. So that's always available too, if that's how you want to handle it. But anyway, that's my process. So let's do the next chapter. Okay, so the first step is going to be importing the wave files that were sent up from Nashville to the project I'm working on. Now, they send in Pro Tools. For most people that work in Pro Tools, you're done. You open the project and you start working, or you apply your templates or whatever you want to do. I have a very specific template set up for this hybrid design. So even if I was working in Pro Tools, I would still have to, put it into my template. But as it is, I work much faster. I know Nuendo better. I do move most projects to Nuendo. And that's, it's comfort for me, and it's also value added for the client because they're getting my best work that way. So I've already, I have Pro Tools, I have Logic, I have Ableton as well. So projects come in, it's very easy. I open the Pro Tools project, and then I just consolidate the tracks and export them as waves, all with the same start time. That's a pretty straightforward process. You can go find a million YouTubes on how to do that if you need to. So I've already done that. I've already created a folder with the wave files, and the nice thing about that too is on your export from Pro Tools, or for me, I can export them at the resolution that I wanted anyway, which is 9632. And there's a question about why would you bother to do that if the tracks were not recorded at that resolution? Aren't you sort of wasting space? And it's not, you are taking up more space, and you are taking up more DSP, of course, but I don't consider it a waste for the reason that all of the processing that I'm doing and the conversion that I'm doing in my hybrid approach then is all at 96K. And there's definitely a benefit to that as well. There are plugins that don't use oversampling when maybe they should. There are plugins that do use oversampling, or there's plugins that upsample to 96K anyway, and if you're already running at 96K, they don't have to do that. There's some UAD plugins that do that. So there are sonic reasons for working at 96K, and then particularly with the conversion of the D to A conversion of all the tracks, and then the A to D conversion of the mix file, I want that at a higher resolution as well. It just gets all the anti-aliasing filters out of the equation altogether. They're happening now, instead of at 22 kilohertz, they're happening at 44, and they're nowhere near the audible spectrum at that point. So I see an advantage in that, and I do this, but you obviously don't have to. So all right, so we have the tracks. Now in this case, I already brought in the first 2 songs. This is a 5-song package that was sent to me. I've already done mixes. What I'm doing here is I'm doing very good mixes for the artist to practice singing over, so he can work out his vocals to the actual tracks and have them sound really good, and then come in and record to that exact same mix. So I'll capture the mix, and then he can track to that, and then I can go in and tweak that mix however I need to once I have his vocals and all the tracks involved. So that's my process. And also that means I don't have to worry about recall. I have, unless he wants something changed in the mix when he's recording, and then we'll just do that if we need to do that. But that's the process I've been doing, and it's been working really, really well. And it gives the artist a really slick mix to record to, and that's always a nice thing as well. It's inspiring to them. So that's my process. So in this case, I've already done 2 songs. So the way that I handle this is, when I finish a mix and I'm going on to the next one, these are all the same. These are all tracks coming from the same studio with basically the same sounds and certainly the same layout. That's not always the case, but in this case, there's an ergonomic benefit to that. And when it comes time to do the final mix, at that point, I can get more creative. I can push the songs sort of away from each other. But right now, the fact that they're all kind of similar is helpful, because I can just use the same template from the last one for the next one. So what I do there is, when I finish doing the rough mix of one song, I'll delete the audio files, and then I'll do a backup, which is a Cubase Nuendo thing, but every DAW has their own version of this. So basically the idea is I'm saving the project to a brand new folder under a brand new name, and it's creating a new audio folder. It is not referencing the same audio folder as the previous song. And there's a lot of advantages to that. We've all seen that problem where, audio files get mixed up, and particularly when you're doing a save as situation. If you just do a simple save as in a project to create the next song's project, then both songs are referencing the same audio folder. You don't really want that. It's better to have them separate. So then they're more portable that way, and you're less likely to lose tracks in backups and things like that. So I've already done that. I've already backed up this project, renamed it, put it in its own folder. It's got its own new audio folder. So I've already, the tracks are already laid out, basically. Now, the fast way to import tracks is just grab them all, drag them over, and you're done. But in this case, I want all the processing that I already have set up. So what I'm going to do is take each individual track, and it doesn't even really matter what order, and I'm just going to drag them over. So this is a snare track, and all I care about is that it lands on the snare. And I know probably people are watching this freaking out going, oh my God, you're losing the sync. Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of that. So here, snare, tom, and this is a good place to cut. Okay, so we've dragged all the tracks over into the project, and yeah, randomly. They definitely are not in sync. They don't have the same start time. It's okay. It's okay. We're going to be all right. So you'll notice that there's some blank tracks. That's because this song didn't have all the same instrumentation that the song before it had. That's cool. One interesting thing to note is that on all 5 of these songs, the hi-hat was fakaked. It wasn't there. If you boost it really loud, you hear that there's some kind of gnarly noise in there. Basically, they had a technical malfunction. And you know what? That happens. And if it was the bass or a guitar or something we really couldn't live without, then you get on the phone or whatever, you send an email, you get them to fix it, you get them to do something about it. In this case, it's not a showstopper. I love hi-hat. It's no lack of love for hi-hat, but there is plenty of it in the overheads, and so we're okay. And so we're gonna, on all the songs it's been an issue. That's why you see it's already muted. And they sent a click, that's already muted, that's okay. Now, when I was exporting from Pro Tools, I took note of all of the BPMs, and you'll see that in the name of the folder, I put the BPM. I've seen this a lot on tracks that are transferred where there's either there's no text file, there's no notes, there's no nothing. If you should be on the grid, and if you're on the grid, there's a BPM. If there's a BPM, you got to tell the people you're sending it to. I find the best way to do it is just put it in the title of the folder, then they can't miss it, right? So I had already set the BPM before dragging these tracks in, so that's all correct. We're going to make sure that we're moving on the grid, and again, every DAW has its own way of doing that. Pro Tools is actually particularly good at that. And I'm just going to arbitrarily say bar 4. I'm going to put, it's snapping the cursor there. And then here's the nice thing. There is a command in every DAW, I am sure, which is locate to cursor. So now it's hard to do this while holding the camera, and I don't know where my camera mount is. So I'm holding it with one hand, but you'll see it's blah, 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 and they are all locked to the same start time. See, that sync was really not that big a deal. And this way, all my tracks are already in the right place. Now, I don't know about other DAWs, but in Nuendo or Cubase, if you multi-select the damn things and hit the command, it keeps their relative displacement, which you do not want. So that's why I'm sure there's a command that doesn't do that, but I haven't found it yet. So I just do them individually. It's just not that big a deal. Alrighty, so now we have all of our tracks imported and in sync. And in this case, I've already got a pretty decent mix already set up. And there can be individual, every song is different. The song before this, a part of my template is the artist has kick and snare samples from a particular library that he particularly loves, and they happen to sound really good, so I have no problem with that. I use Slate Trigger to make them happen. But interesting is, in the last song, there was side stick in the first verse, and I did not want a trigger happening there. So as you can see, I had automation read enabled, and I simply bypassed the trigger during the side stick stuff, and then just turned it on when the snare came back on, and that worked beautifully. So I don't know this song, I've never heard it before, so I turned the automation off, and this is one of the things I love about having an analog console. It's all right in front of you. I mean, look, man, it is easier than mousing around channels, right? So we want to, I've never heard this before. Pull them all down that fast, right? Kick. And the other thing that's great about this is the master insert. If your mix gets loud here, it can easily overwhelm. It can overload any outboard gear you have on your master insert. So having everything on analog faders like this, I can do exactly what I just did. I can pull them all down and just rebuild the faders in 30 seconds or a minute and get a level that's hitting all the insert stuff in a nice, comfortable way. No big deal. And this does not affect any of my output levels from the DAW. It doesn't affect what's hitting, any outboard gear that happens to be inserted. In addition to these equalizers, every one of these channels, including these 16 summing inputs, has analog inserts. So that's how we bring in the outboard gear over there. For instance, right now my bass is on one of the summing inputs. but I have it running through an API equalizer and then the V comp. I've got guitars running through the purple compressors, so on and so forth. So yeah, you don't want to lose any of that gain staging, right? So by having the analog faders makes it a lot easier. And even though I'm hitting the Pultex first, the VT7 is a great meter for how hard I'm hitting that bus altogether. All right, isn't that snare sample fantastic? I think it's at about 50%. We have to take a look, but so there's our hi-hat with the overheads. If I had a separate one, I'd probably make it a little louder and compress it or something, but it's fine, it works. It's our bass. And then I got the guitars going through that gorgeous Helios EQ. Oh man, what a sound. And we got Hammond on the keys. And then I have a send here just for in-the-box effects, for plug-in effects. I also have, and again, this is from my other videos, on these aux sends, so 1 and 2, I have mono sends to the Lexicon PCM92. Now that unit is awesome because it's 2 engines, 2 discrete independent engines, and you can get 2 entirely different effects. They will both output in stereo. Now that stereo send is together, so you don't have independent control over that. Not ideal, but still you get 2 incredibly high quality effects. So for me, I have a drum reverb on my aux 1 and I have a vocal reverb on my aux 2. Both stereo, both awesome. This board happens to have a summing input. Now they designed that to be able to bring in another summing mixer, and that enters the mix path prior to the mix bus processing, so that's nice. And so basically that's my reverb return, and I don't have, it's unfortunate I don't have a level adjust for that, but all I have to do is use my sends. So if I want to duck the vocal reverb a little, it's right there. So like right here, I can turn on and off my mix bus insert and my reverbs. And they're really great reverbs. I have fantastic plugins. I love the plugins that I have, but there's a reason I spent the money on that Lexicon. It's just fantastic. So that's pretty much my process. And then right now we're monitoring through, as you can see, the input channel, and we're not even, the level's low right now, so you can turn that up a little bit. You see the needle start to move on that SSL. That's a pre-fader insert on the DAW input. And then, Nuendo and Cubase are unique in that they have post-fader inserts. And I don't think any other DAW I'm aware of has that. I like that. So what you're able to do is, even though there's a makeup gain knob on this compressor, that's also, like any plugin, that makeup gain is also interacting. They're trying to simulate the harmonic distortion in the hardware. I don't always want that. I kind of want to get my sound and leave it there. So what I'm able to do is this fader, this input, that's on my input channel. So that's in between these two. So the fader's after this compressor, before the brick wall limiter. And this right now, this is monitoring the input to the brick wall limiter. It's post fader. So I can adjust that just with this fader. And not have any artifacts or worry about like if the plugin is simulating something I don't want it to. just a nice little level adjust there to hit the brick wall limiter at the optimal level. Gain staging is everything, both in the box and out of the box. Watching your input and output levels between at every juncture, at every plug-in, at every place it goes someplace new, so important. And then I have a capture channel right now. I have it in input, and all you do is so I have the capture channel in solo safe, and that's feeding my what would be my master output in Pro Tools, or in Nuendo it's my stereo out. It's the 2-mix out. So none of the individual channels, they're all going to their own output buses. The only thing going to my mix out is what's coming back, right? Here in my monitor section, that's coming back on my 2-track, right? Like, that's the actual mixer. But this is how I'm able to hear the plugins that I'm putting on after it gets back to the computer. That SSL compressor and that brick wall limiter, right? And then all you gotta do is throw your capture channel into record. And the other nice thing is when you're done, your waveform is right there and you can see, oh, I crushed that too much, and so on and so forth. So it's a great system. It works really well. And when you're recording to the DAW, the only thing to note is that it's going to dump the resulting audio file into your audio folder with your tracks. No big deal. You just go find it. Organize your folder by recently added or whatever, date created, date modified, and your mix will be right there. So that's it. That's my process, and I'm finding that it really, really works well. And I didn't really get into it, but as you can see, there's these insert plugins, and I make a lot of use of these SSL channels. There's that new 4KB. I love this thing. It's just got so much punch and color, and so that's it's on the B3, it's on all kinds of things, and SSL makes this 360 thing. You can just press it there, and boom, you're looking at more or less an SSL console. You can here we go. You can move that up and down. You can look at your EQs. Actually, that's something that got lost in. They just did an update, and it kind of got lost in the update. Like you used to be able. This was easier to move between the dynamics and the EQs before. Hopefully, they will work on that. But at any rate, so you can see all of your channels in one place, and your bus compressors up to whatever it is, 5 or 7 of them if you happen to be using that many. I've never used that many, but. And right now, I'm not doing it yet, but when I do the final mix, I will use, there's a stereo send on the API. So you've got level and pan on this concentric knob, and I will use that to create my parallel drum bus and go to the pair of distressors linked, and they will come back here. And that's my parallel drums right there too. And I think that's about it. I think I've covered my process. All right. Again, just wanted to share it with you. And I know this is probably a long way around, but it's, I find it interesting. The other thing, if you've been watching the other videos, is you've seen me trying these different approaches, particularly since getting this console. And I've kind of come full circle where I've decided that, like, I don't want to let whether I can recall something hold me back from getting the very best sound. So actually, this might be the most important part of the video. I hope some of you stuck around for it. My process is that when I'm starting a mix fresh, I'm going to start with the best sounds and then kind of work backwards, since the analog stage has to be after the plug-in stage. What I'll do is I'll get everything, patched and coming up in the right place. and I will have everything off, so I'm hearing the raw tracks. And this, any mix engineer will tell you this: start off with pans and faders, and get the mix as balanced as you possibly can with just volume and pans. It's a great way to start any mix, and just get perspective on what you've really got, and how much is being masked, and so on and so forth. And then, I will start with the highest quality tools as I see them. So I'll start with my analog EQs and my analog compressors, and work backwards. And so say, okay, how close can I get this to where I want it? And then once I've addressed the analog side, then I'll go in and I'll put up the plugins, and similarly, that's a hard word, I will start with the mix bus, the mix insert off, and that's different people work differently that way. I really find that when you mix into mix bus processing, I've almost never had a situation where I've done that, or I've seen anybody else do that, where when you're done with the mix, if you turn off that mix bus, anything good is happening underneath. It's always a total mess underneath. And so I try to get the mix really to a place where I love it and I'm happy, and then turn on the mix insert and sort of the two bus, or mastering, as you will, analog processing. And that tends to work best for me. But so that's my process. All right. Thanks for sharing. And it's been fun expanding the YouTube viewership. And please share your comments. There's been some great discussions in the comments here. And, like and share, of course, if you can. And I will try to engage with you, because it's fun. We all, we can all learn from each other. All right. Have a good one. Take care.